Do you enjoy the river piece more? Because Mississippi, of course, is a major river, and I'm sure that's really entertaining to go up and down it. Or do you enjoy the open water stuff?
Back when I was on the open water, and it was a very small portion of my career, probably 5 years total on and off. When I was on the open water, I loved it. I really didn't know much about the inland river system. So that just came later in my career. I had no idea this is where I would end up, but it is a very, vast, large industry, and there's a lot of opportunity. And when you start into it, I wouldn't say people start in and go into the river industry and move on to other things much. Typically, people that start in the river industry stay there, but it definitely happens frequently the opposite direction. It's, the river industry, the lifestyle we live here is much better than what we had offshore back when I worked out there.
So you eventually became captain working for
Yes.
Marquette Marine on the river. Tell us, how long it took to do that, what you had to do in order to do it, and what kind of licensing and certification you've got to have as somebody running big barges on the river.
I started, my grandfather was a captain. So that early on when I was working as a deckhand, I had a wife at home, a son at home, one on the way. I was very, I wanted to move up. I knew I didn't want to stay on deck. So that was kind of in my radar. And following in the footsteps of my grandfather. And then I had a brother, an older brother that was 4 years older than me. And he had just recently moved up from deckhand to captain, working for Collie Towing, which is the company I would eventually get my captain's license with years ago in 1996. So, yeah, that's just watching him move up. That's kind of what really led me in that direction and kept me motivated.
And you've got a certification process. I'm sure that, they don't just go, "Hey, congratulations, today you're."
Well, that's a funny story. So I listened to my grandfather's stories from years before. He was a World War II veteran in the Navy, gets out of the Navy and starts working on the inland waterway. There was, from what he said, in the late 40s and early 50s, there was just a handful of boats that worked tow lines on the inland waterway. And his first job was as a deckhand. He rode one trip, came back for the next hitch, goes home, comes back. The captain doesn't show up, and he's hired as the captain. And
Oh my
that's how he
gosh.
started his captain's career. And he was a captain from then on. And we could do a whole podcast on his career alone. So it's a very colorful, a lot of those stories I could not tell about out of there. They get very, very colorful.
But that's probably not how it happened for you, right?
Now, so we have progressed, and I think in a good way, with what I had to go through as a deckhand, an AB, a tankerman, and then on to get my captain's license. That process is a lot. It's more straightforward now. It's more laid out, so more people can take advantage of it, and it's a clearer path. But the way that looks is you come out, and within a 5 year period, I tell guys coming onto the boat, one of the great things about this industry is if you apply yourself within a 5 year period, you can be sitting in the wheelhouse running a boat. Maybe not as a captain, but as a pilot. And there's not a lot of industries where you can do that. And, those steps after a year on deck as a deckhand, most guys serve more a year and a half, 2 years, and then they can go to the Coast Guard, apply, and set. You don't have to go to school. You can study on your own. Most people go to one of the maritime schools. They'll go to a maritime school for normally about 4 weeks, and then they set for their apprentice mate license, which is a training license that allows you to steer in the wheelhouse with a designated examiner captain. So that's how the first phase of that starts.